February 11th started with temperatures in the 20s, and then it began to rain, and things went downhill from there. Of course, the ice began to develop. Temperatures remained less than freezing.
So we started getting folks out, getting our crews out, and making repairs. Well, as the night went on, it continued to be cold. We had freezing fog after that. We were working across the system to make repairs. We had probably 3,000 to 4,000 people out at that time.
And a couple of days later, we had snow. Some places 4, some places as much as 6 inches. And then we hit the records for the low temperatures into the single digits, approaching 0. And things hardened, that ice hardened.
Road conditions were undrivable, really, for people in the hill country. If you didn't have a 4-wheel drive vehicle, you couldn't get around.
A couple of days later, still no above freezing temperatures, and we received another couple of inches of snow. For 8 days, the temperatures never got above freezing.
And that just completely decimated our system.
Normally an ice storm comes through and it's like a 24-hour event. It's freezing rain and it accumulates on the line, and the weight of all that ice takes the power lines down. And then normally the next day we're in position to go and we start our restoration. But this storm, it just kept going. There was like 4 or 5 different storms back to back.
In that same time frame, LCRA was having problem with the transmission system. We had the rolling blackouts with ERCOT, which just led to a bunch of chaos for those first 8 days. It was just something that uncharted territory. During this time, our crews were working 16, 18-hour days, trying to get on what power we could.
At the location up at Cherry Mountain Loop, where we had 10 poles down the first day and had made repairs, when we showed up the next day, there were 20 more poles down.
So the first few days, it was almost like we weren't getting anything accomplished, because the stuff we would put back up during the day and even into the night, we'd get more precipitation, during the night or early morning, and the next poles would break, or the same lines would go down again. So it kind of felt like it was a hopeless cause, but at the same time, we were actually being able to keep a lot of people in power.
So you have all that, and now let's throw in the rolling outages from ERCOT. And you'd have an outage that would last 2 to 3 hours, and the power would be restored at that substation and turned off at another substation. We had one substation that when the power was restored, it tripped the protective device out on the line, it tripped a breaker in the substation, and it tripped the high side of the substation almost simultaneously because the demand was so high and the load current went up so quickly. I've never seen that in my career where you just had that much load. So that was a 2-day fight just to deal with the rolling outages. And these events were happening across the state, not just at Central Texas, but across Texas. That made it difficult to get additional help to restore our system. Our crews had been asked to go and support other companies before the storm, and we held them. And we made sure our folks were here. We made sure we had material. When we knew we needed help, when we started asking for help, that help was limited because they were working on restoration in Dallas or restoration in Houston or even restoration at Johnson City, our neighboring company at Pedernales.
We'd brought all of our construction and service people from Llano and Mason, so they came down and basically worked as one of the contract crews.
I pulled all my crews, which was about 3 construction crews, 3 service crews, around 30 guys. We pulled them down to the Gillespie County area. We started working down there around Harper and Doss area. A lot more damage here in the Gillespie County area than what we did up north. We had maybe 1 inch ice up there. We were seeing damage of 2 inches of ice in these areas here. At one point in time, it took us in 2.5 days there south of Doss. We put 51 poles and over 30,000 feet of wire in 2.5 days, and we might have gotten 20 meters on in that time period. So it's such a rural area. Meters are 2 to 3 miles apart. To try to get 1 meter on takes a lot of time and a lot of effort.
The inside people were working basically the same hours as the outside people. They were answering phone calls, as many as they could, and giving what information we could at the time.
There was phone call after phone call after phone call, which was frustrating, but not as frustrating as it would be if I had no power. So I totally understood everyone's frustration. I remember one lady, she was really, really upset, and she was just saying really mean things, but I was just kind of keeping my calm because I have been in the situation where I don't know who to talk to, but I just need some things to let out. So I totally understood where everyone was coming from, whether they were mean, whether they were helpful, whether they were just frustrated, just wanted to vent. Like, I totally get it.
The actual restoration started probably the 9th day after the first ice storm came through. That's when we started making ground on restoring the system.
During those 8 days, we were planning on what we were going to do when we got time to go start. We began the rebuild. We brought in 50 crews. Mitch and I agreed that that's what we needed to start. We were able to get a majority of the people into a hotel that's a quarter of a mile from here, so in the morning they came by the co-op, picked up 2 breakfast tacos, a sandwich, a bag of chips, and a cookie, and were on their way to their job sites. So we felt like we were working at max capacity from a safety standpoint and from a getting things done standpoint efficiently.
It was a methodical approach. We worked from the areas that had the largest number of people out, worked in those areas first, to the areas that had the fewest number of people out.
The max number of people that we had in here at one time were probably about 150 outsiders. And then of course we've got roughly 80, 90 outside employees that were working on the rebuild.
Early on, we knew we had quite a few poles down. We ordered all the poles we could get shipped from our vendor. We ordered extra material, and fortunately, that good planning, we never ran out of equipment in making repairs.
They actually dropped poles as close as they could to the damaged area. That way our crews didn't have to waste time coming all the way back into the warehouse and load poles and go all the way back out. They were right there. They would go a mile or 2 down the road and load the poles they needed, and I believe cross arms, some transformers, other things they had. Whatever they could drop out there, they would drop out there.
Out at Cherry Mountain Loop, where we had such extreme damage, there's 2 transmission lines that run through that area, and LCRA had 75 structures down on their transmission line, and then adjacent to that, AEP had another 100 structures down. After that, there was questions about trimming trees and taking care of the system.
Most of Central Texas Electric's system has been classified by the National Electric Safety Code to be in the light loading district. They are technically only required to design the system for no ice and 40-mile-an-hour winds. Central Texas has opted to be more robust in their design by electing to design to the medium loading district standards, designing for quarter-inch ice and 40-mile-an-hour winds. Central Texas also does a pole inspection process on their own where they inspect the integrity and the strength of the pole. They do that on a rotating basis to identify poles that need to be replaced prior to them failing.
We test approximately 9,000 poles a year and replace about 10% of those. We spend about $2 million to $2.5 million on tree trimming. You know, if you watch the local news, the event was the cold weather, the rolling outages that went across Texas. But in Gillespie County, that rain and extreme cold we had early on with the freeze devastated a line from north of Willow City to south of Mountain Home.
It was basically a 25 mile swath that ran about 80 miles from up in the Willow City area down north of Fredericksburg about 6 or 7 miles and out toward Hilltop and then over toward Doss, Harper, and then down toward Mountain Home. Probably the greatest lesson that I've learned from this, or that I saw through this event, was the ability of the employees to react and to overcome whatever obstacles may have been in their way working through this. And I think that this event gave this group of employees a real opportunity to pull together and to do an enormous task. And I just can't tell you how proud I am of the way that they accomplished this. It was amazing.